Hello, hello. Welcome to the Wellness on Purpose podcast, where our intention is to provide you with impactful, educational, and realistic information to help you progress on your journey to live wellness on purpose now and for future generations. This podcast shares insights to current health trends with industry and brand leaders in the health and wellness world. This podcast is brought to you by Joanne's Place Health Foods from Peterborough and Lindsay, Ontario. My name is Marissa Laughlin. I'm a holistic nutritionist and functional lab practitioner. I've been working alongside Joanne's Place for the last 8 years, and I'm so excited to continue to be your host for this podcast. This year on the podcast, we have some incredible guests lined up. We'll be talking about cognitive health, digestive health, mitochondrial and energy support, sun-safe skincare, how to prevent BV, fertility, IBD, iron deficiencies, hormones, and so much more. If you want to be the first to know when a new episode is dropped, be sure to go over to your preferred platform, follow our page, and then also go over and find us on social media. We're going to be releasing information there as soon as a new episode drops. Now, before we kick off our 2023 season, I want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you listening. We are so grateful to have been a part of your wellness journey over the years, and we're really looking forward to continuing to support you with industry and brand leaders on this podcast over the next year. Hello everyone, and welcome to the first official episode of 2023. I decided to kick off this season with a previous guest that's been on the podcast, Jason Watkins from Purica. And this couldn't have come at a better time because I've seen the conversation about cognitive health been floating around on social media platforms and TikTok and Instagram. And I thought, who better could talk on this topic than Jason? Because one of the most recommended products for brain health, cognitive function, memory is medicinal mushrooms. And if you've listened to any of our previous episodes with Jason, he has shared an incredible amount of education and experience around medicinal mushrooms and the benefits for longevity, immunity, digestion, stress. And today we're going to be covering cognitive health. So in case you've missed any of those episodes, I will leave them in the description below for you to check out, as well as on our show notes. So for today's episode specifically, I've asked Jason to join us again to talk about cognitive health. And we've been seeing a lot of attention drawn to cognitive health in terms of memory, mental clarity, longevity. And I think there's two reasons as to why this is happening. First, I think that the reality of our world and the mental health crisis that we are facing is unbelievable almost. It is at an all-time high. I love that people are sharing their journeys and looking for additional resources to support their journey and really improve their mental health. But because this conversation has come up so much, which is a good thing, I think more conversation about the integrity and the health of our cognitive ability and function is also come up a lot as well, which is amazing. Now, the other end of that, I think that there's been a lot more research in terms of cognitive impairments happening earlier in people's lives. So we're hearing of people in their 30s, 40s, 50s losing their memories, short-term memory, long-term memory loss, and just not having the recall that they're used to. And this is a little bit alarming. So I think for preventative measures, we should also be talking about cognitive health and how we can better support ourselves for longevity. So that is why I've asked Jason from Purica to join us today to open up with us and share his knowledge, his recommendations, and also some of the research that he's found on this topic. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Jason back onto the podcast. Hello, Jason. Happy New Year. How is 2023 going so far?
Hello, Marissa. Yeah, it is going. We talked earlier. It's just BC's coast is nice and wet. Rain.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again on the podcast. It's always a pleasure talking to you. You're just a wealth of information. I know our podcasts previously, our listeners have absolutely loved. So I had to ask you to come back on the podcast today to talk specifically about cognitive health. And we have seen many industry leaders talk more and more about cognitive health over the last few years. And I really think it's because The conversation around mental health has become definitely more normalized, as well as they're finding in a lot of research in preventing cognitive impairments. We should be, looking at preventative measures earlier on in everyone's life. Maybe not when it gets to the point where they're reaching diagnosis or they're starting to see that memory loss. And it's something that we should be considering really earlier on in our lives. So I'd love to know what your thoughts are about cognitive health and how this has really become a big conversation in the wellness industry over the last few years.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely as time is due. Like in the ancient East, it's always been at the top. In the West, we were really a lot more physically oriented. So things that happen to the body. I remember years ago, I saw a presentation and they were talking about polls they had done, questionnaires in regards to what are people the most scared of happening to in their life. And it seemed right at the very top was losing their mind. And so I think that was a huge thing. And things like, with dementia and Alzheimer's and even Parkinson's, severe Parkinson's, things like that, where they're losing control of their body and it's affecting memories and things like that. I think that is obviously huge. And I feel like it's going to and already has become worse than it has been in a long time. And I think we've talked before on this program from an Eastern perspective and now even Western psychology. When you're in a chronic alarm response, that typically the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response is that you're constantly on guard, constantly building yourself up physically or mentally or whatever in a protective response. You're stuck in a response that's actually degrading your mind. And I think not just in a physical sense, but also the mind's ability to function properly is degraded. And so I think that's a huge thing right now. It's not only losing your memory and losing mind-body coordination, obviously people with Parkinson's and other conditions and MS, things like that, but also the pendulum swing of, depression and anxiety back and forth. And you don't have to call it bipolar. I think most people are going through this where you're swinging from one extreme to the next and opinions, one extreme to the next. You really don't get a break. And that is affecting how the mind functions overall, so that it's much more difficult to handle any situation, no matter how small it may seem to others. Once you get in the habit of responding to something and are really stressed out or your nervous system's on fire, it's just going to keep on happening more and more and more and more. And I think that's what's happening. So long story short is memory loss huge, mind-body coordination, but the inability to cope with stress is a massive one. And that's definitely something that we need to address in how to improve the mind's ability to cope with all these different things.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to talk a little bit more about stress in today's episode, but I like that you touched on, it's really hard to make decisions and think clearly when we are going back and forth between, anxiety, depression, just even having like no feeling at all and just being like a neutral position. Because as soon as you get to that neutral position and you think that you've collectively brought yourself, together, you're feeling stable, there's something else that will set that off that you're coming into contact with. And I'm going to blame social media for this, right? You've got your own opinions or your own thoughts on something. And then as soon as you hear it from someone else, you start to question your thought process and your decisions and your mental capacity. And it's just this ongoing cycle that we just seem to never really kind of become stable in unless we start to have more and more of these conversations about what this looks like and how we can better support ourselves in a preventative way to set the body up in a healthy state. So we're going to talk more about what that can look like in a minute. But before we do, I want to hear from you. For the average individual, when you hear the word cognitive health, I think everybody automatically goes to Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, which is a very big part of this. But even for young individuals listening to this, let's just explore the word cognitive health a little bit more for the average individual. What does this really mean when we're talking about cognitive health?
Yeah, so cognition is really interesting, right? Because in the Indo-Tibetan tradition, which is what I'm formally trained in, And then in Western psychology, it's basically the act of knowing. And knowing is interesting because you know things, but that's not materialistic. That's something immaterial. How do I know things? So it's really difficult to put your finger on what that means because it's very subjective how you know things. And then, so you're going to know when things start to change. For instance, your cognitive health would be number one, obviously memory. You're thinking because knowing, if you start losing the ability to remember names, that seems to be the one that people talk about for years. That's getting more and more intense. And if you depend on, say, the internet to look up something that should be simple, or that you start to lose the ability in counting, right? And some of these things, it's just about use it or lose it. If you stop using certain things, which a lot of people do, so dependency on the internet and on other people's opinions and everything like that, it allows you to become very lazy within the mind, and then you don't build those new connections or reinforce those connections, and so you lose it. So that's just a degradation to do with you're not using it. So that's where just little things, starting to use your mind, little things, right? Remembering names or getting a list of words that you remember in a week or whatever, and then use them with your family, stuff like that. But cognitive health, say memory. But the other thing I think that's more important right now is your ability to cope with whatever's coming at you. And if you're starting to feel that freeze response where you feel overwhelmed, right? And that stress response is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fights, agitation, we've talked about this before, agitation, frustration, judgment, impatient, things like that. That's normal. And that's something we've got to try to go beyond and water off a duck's back kind of idea. Just don't let little things bother you. And then it won't reinforce those connections in your mind and new connections that are associated with just letting those things go. So that's the idea, letting things go. Then the fear response is mostly worry, stressed out, worried, anxiety. But the freeze response is when you really feel overwhelmed. There's too much stuff coming at you, which is the real problem today, right? Too much conflicting information coming at us with an inability to actually critically think through it because we've relied on the internet for so much now, like you're talking about social media and people's opinions, and not saying things that make people attack you, even if you think they're wrong. That's happened. Different experiments they've had. For instance, they held up sticks. So they had a whole group of people, and the bunch of them were actors, and one or two of them were not. And so anyways, they would hold up sticks and a whole bunch of things of lengths of the stick, and they say which one's the longest from longest to shortest, and everybody'd rate them. But then all of a sudden they would throw in scenarios where the one stick was obviously the shortest or close to it, and all the actors would say it's the longest. And the two people that weren't actors, they're from what's going on, but then they would just start agreeing with the other ones. And so I think that's what's happened too. We've become very inauthentic because we're doing things that we don't truly believe in. This is a stress to the mind. It causes sort of like a freeze response where you're denying your own ability to think, right? To conceive of things. What that does is it basically throws you into emotional turmoil, because now you feel like I'm going against what I truly believe because I'm just going along with what everybody says, even though I don't agree with it. That creates an inner angst that's always prevalent there. And so when you're in a state of angst, as anybody knows, try to take a test. You're going to do really poorly unless you've mastered the topic before, because when you're in a state of angst, your ability to remember and to solve different problems is stunted because all you're thinking about is protection. That's what your body and mind is geared at when you're stressed. So anyways, all of today's times with all this information coming at you, all this disagreement, all these social media platforms just pushing a certain type of message and then mocking and saying horrible things to each other if you don't agree in society, whatever, that is causing you to lose your mind, your ability to remember, getting you stuck in a stress response, which ages you. This is a key thing. So you're not only aging your body when you're being in a stress response, which is similar to being on corticosteroids chronically or having Cushing syndrome. Your mind, your ability to think and everything is being altered. So today's times are extremely stressful, and that's going to impact not only today how you feel, but these different conditions to do with dementia. So senility, early onset senility and dementia, and Alzheimer's and things like that. So, I mean, this is a huge topic. And these times right now are not conducive to ideal mind at ease, free and clear, feeling good, feeling like you can critically think through situations that you don't have to follow. It's very much more like a mob mentality, and that's kind of a scary time to be in. So there's definitely things that you have to do to account for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's really key here is that there's just so many factors around your mindset in terms of that as well. So I want to talk more about those types of lifestyle habits that have a direct impact on our cognitive health in terms of the ability to think clearly, to increase our memory recall, to keep us aware and alert, and also to keep us in that learning capacity. Like you said, that you really have to use it or you lose it. And I think that goes the same for learning things, as things are always evolving. Research is always evolving. So information that our listeners can relate to in terms of their lifestyle factors, and then what we can do about that. Do we need to make adjustments? Do we need to eliminate these or replace them? So I want to start with caffeine. This is a huge conversation on its own because some people love it, some people don't. But in terms of cognitive function, from a professional standpoint, what is your opinion for cognitive health?
So I take more of the open-minded stance that each individual is definitely different, like you said. Caffeine. So say from my perspective, because I do a lot of study and I have done for a long time. If I drink coffee too many days in a row or have, say, more than one cup of coffee, interesting thing happens to me. So I can take it from this perspective, because caffeine does throw you in, some people especially, into more of a stressed out, kind of agitated response. And you feel like you have a lot of energy and your mind really works, but then it can go dive really quickly. So it makes it worse. For me, if I did drink too much caffeine, I don't tend to have as much interest in learning new things. Like I don't really feel like I want to read. I do, and I have to push through it. If I don't drink, but then if I say I was drinking caffeine for a couple of weeks and then I stop drinking caffeine for a day or two, then it will affect me still. I don't feel like reading, I'm kind of tired, whatever. But say after a couple of days being off caffeine, 2 or 3 days, then I start to get that energy, enthusiasm to read again. Some of the stuff I'm reading is very intense, mind-bending stuff. So it really takes a really concentrated focus and open mindset. So I think caffeine, if I'm going to say, for some people, I feel like it's very beneficial, but
Okay.
only at moderate amounts. But for other people, I think that they don't realize how it's kind of made them apathetic, disinterested in a lot of things that they normally would be interested in. So it's kind of like finding something different for some people, whereas other people, it seems to be a great thing. I think it's different mindsets, and also different, people say have different blood types and everything have an effect on that. I know there's research into that. It's interesting. I tend to
Yeah.
go with just how you feel.
And I'm sure that also, to take into consideration in terms of caffeine, it would definitely depend on the type of caffeine as well. Like, are we looking at good quality, organic, fair trade coffee with minimal pesticides? I think there's a huge connection between the toxicity load that can come from coffee alone versus having caffeine from, say, like an herbal tea, or not herbal tea, like a black tea or matcha, a little bit of caffeine in there as well. So I think those choices will also play an impact on your cognitive health, correct?
Yes, and that's interesting because caffeine is a subset of an overall general group called methylxanthines. So you have caffeine, and like you said, I would not drink coffee that's not organic, especially if you're drinking it all the time because it's accumulating. But you have caffeine, say from coffee, and in other herbs, and that it occurs. And then there's a theophylline or theophylline. That's typically in tea. That has kind of like a nice effect on the bronchioles, which is opening them up for breathing and things like that. If you have breathing issues, so different types of teas, including black teas and green teas. And then you have theobromine, another typical one, which is in chocolate. I mean, so these are all related compounds. And sometimes when you group them together, say in the traditional form of drinking yerba mate or things like that, they have a different kind of effect that some of them balance each other. So it's not so much like a drug effect, because if you just have one of the methylxanthine class in high level, it does have more of that stimulant, aggressive drug effect.
So essentially changing up your caffeine intake, looking at different sources of where your caffeine comes from, and then as always, making sure it is of the best quality that is available to you then.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, we've seen a very large emphasis on this topic lately for longevity. And as I mentioned, we've been seeing a lot of research come out in terms of the effects on potentially cancer. So I want to know, alcohol, what are your thoughts in terms of cognitive health? Like maybe a few examples. So, like having an occasional drink versus having one maybe every day. Is there any benefit whatsoever for cognitive health? And if there isn't, how how long of a lifestyle would you have to live for it to have an effect on your cognitive ability?
So I think again, I'm gonna take this open-minded kind of position on this. For instance, I'm gonna say for myself, because science is probabilistic, right? So you're doing all these different studies, you see statistical analysis, everybody can infer different things from a study. So I think that's more this idea that you can pull subjectivity out of and make everything in a real objective stance. It doesn't work. It's for instance, the idea of even a particle. I'm going to step on this. This sounds interesting, but a particle used to be thought of as a thing. It builds all of nature, right? You're built of all these atoms and subatomic particles. So it feels like it's solid, but in reality, what they say is that nowadays in quantum physics, reality is built of fields of potential in relation to fields of observation. What does that mean? It's very subjective. So the idea with alcohol here, for me, any alcohol, as far as study and practice and things like that, it's not helping me at all. But I don't deal with all that different types of stress because I utilize meditation and my lifestyle, things like that. But if someone was very stressed out and they don't have any other tools, then a moderate intake of alcohol, I think, is going to help them calm down enough so they actually might feel better. I'm not saying though, when you promote alcohol, it's from an ancient perspective, unless you're already in a deep level of understanding and practice, it's not really helping. It's more like a hammock response. You're trying to escape from reality. For instance, I'll tie this back to the use of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs. That's like antidepressant drugs. So antidepressant meds have been pushed out for forever. And it's because people go through these different swings, right? Typically, there's the swing of depression, followed by anxiety, agitation, or inability to cope with things. Those usually go together in pendulum swings. And so they said that, serotonin was involved in depression. So they give you a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. In other words, it's going to stay in circulation longer. And that's supposed to treat depression. And so they've been doing this forever. But what it really did is numb people. It didn't help with depression. Serotonin's not involved in depression that way. And that's what the big meta-analysis just showed just last year. So the idea is it numbed you and you didn't feel those pendulum swings. So, it must have helped me, but you don't feel good. You just feel numbed. I think that can happen a lot of times with alcohol when people are feeling overwhelmed. So alcohol use, I think, has probably gone up quite a bit. And anytime there's, stressful world situations. But right now, I think it's so intense because people are feeling so overwhelmed, overstimulated. It's just to try to get out of it. But if you overuse alcohol, obviously, it's degrading your tissues. Like it causes a response where you're increasing free radical load, increasing, like if you're a car, increasing the exhaust, blowing it back into the car. So it's basically damaging things. But if you have a low dose and it's not all the time, I think that can help a lot of people, I think, probably because they are much more agitated in life or just feeling completely overwhelmed, which is understandable in these times. But it's a touchy one because obviously, if people are utilizing it to get out of stress and never find any other tools that are, say, more appropriate or more self-reliant, where you don't depend on anything to be able to deal with stress, including alcohol or different foods or whatever. I'm sorry I kind of beat around the bush on that one, but I think it's a very touchy subject. I think that for some it's going to benefit and others it's not going to benefit at all.
Yeah. And I think that goes for probably most health related conversations, not just cognitive health when it comes to alcohol in particular, is there's, a big time and place. But from my personal experience, I was about almost 2 years sober recently, and just for more of an experiment. And there was a period of time where there was like this transitional phase of like doing it, and then there was a moment where it kind of was like, this is worth it because I can now have such clear thinking and clear decision making. But it took a while to get to that point. And I was someone who drank very infrequently prior to, but for somebody who does drink regularly, tries to stop drinking, and then waits for that aha moment, it can be very stressful. I think it's worth it for people to definitely try it and get to that point where they're not codependent on alcohol or any stimulant for that factor. But yeah, it is a tricky one. And you mentioned that you choose to, use meditation as a supportive lifestyle. So I would love to learn a little bit more about that in terms of meditation and cognitive health. Do you really see, and have you seen in your research, more of a benefit of that specifically for cognitive health, or are you using it more as the stress component?
Yeah, I think that so in research with meditation, there's many different types of meditation, especially, but they can basically be grouped into two different types. One is more a calm abiding, or really a serenity meditation, where you're just basically calming, letting go. Because really, meditation really is about that. It's about being able to let go in every moment of, emotional afflictions that come up, or cognitive bias, or conceptual, ways of thinking, or just your overall pulse of how you address something and habitually react. It's basically about letting go into a more open-minded kind of spontaneous stance, where you're not such a slave to your emotions, your concepts about life, and your habitual ways of behaving. So once you get in that stage, it's like the open blue sky mind. You're no longer caught in the clouds of thoughts and emotions and stances. That's the first stage. And then when you're in that state, then it's more of a clear way of clear seeing. So that would be like you're in the blue sky, or you're, instead of being down in the valley amongst the forest, you can't see anything, you're now, say, up in the mountain in a blue sky, and you can see the expanse. So you're much less likely to become worried and stressed out if you can see more of the picture. So your mind, when it's stressed, really gets caught down in the valley, in the forest, and in the deep fog or mist. You can't see things straight. So you just act like you did for years and years and years and years, and that stresses you out. So I think that's what we're going through right now. There's all of these different opinions and all this different data and all these different ways of behaving and saying things and how you're supposed to behave, how you're being taught. It really is like being caught in the clouds, and it doesn't feel good. And to not be able to say what you actually are feeling or thinking without being attacked, even if that's the way you truly feel, is not a good place to be in the world. And that's where we're at. So I feel like people are figuring this out. This is not right, even if they've been participating in that kind of way of being. So meditation, instead of turning to things that just help you escape from it, but you're not actually developing any tools to get through it, it's going to come right back at you once the effects of alcohol or caffeine or whatever wear off, or whatever drug you're choosing, or whatever thing you're doing, even watching movies for 15 hours in a row just to escape the world. That's not developing tools. So then you jump right back in, and sometimes it's actually worse, because now you felt better when you were relieved or whatever it was, with however your hammock response was. Then you get back thrown into the fray and you feel freaked out, and it feels worse than ever. And then you just want to go back to it. So then it becomes a real habit, because it's the only thing that helps you escape. Whereas meditation, yes, in that serenity, just letting go, you feel totally calm, at ease. Your mind really clears up. It's not like just sitting in calm. It's not like sleeping. It's like you're really super aware, but super calm, and nothing could even bother you. Everything's just flowing off you. And then you can see things without being in a reactive state. But once you're in that state and you start to become familiar with it, you actually your mind starts reprocessing in a way, rewiring itself for, instead of protection, for connection. So you actually enjoy everything that's going out, because you're not getting trapped up in it, right? And that's what you're trying to do with these escape responses. And it might work for a few minutes or an hours or whatever, but then you have to keep doing it more and more and more and more. And it's not actually doing anything. It's just showing you that there's some space in your mind, that you don't have to become so tied up. with all these thoughts and feelings and what everybody else's opinions are and what you're supposed to do and political correctness and all the stuff people are throwing at everybody. Meditation just lets you see everything, relax, your body and mind become more and more wired for that. So you actually, for me, what it does, it makes you feel younger in your mind and your body. That just starts to happen because you're not in a stress response. You're in a healing, regenerative, rest and repair and digest response. So everything starts to function better. And then it's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Then you start feeling better in your mind. Then your body starts feeling better. And it's just, then it cycles. But all these other things, they don't help your body either, because we get into these habits, of falling into these hammock responses, and our bodies suffer, and then our minds suffer because we feel physically bad. So, you know what I mean? It's just that domino effect. Meditation is basically, for me, the most powerful thing to pull you out of that state. But it takes someone doing it, or like anything else, you have to practice it to become good at it. I think that's a problem in today's society. Everybody wants everything right now, worse than ever, and I'm entitled, I should have everything right now, even that. But meditation, you have to work through the first part. You're going to start seeing, like, they call it a waterfall effect. I won't cover more of this, but just this one is, people often quit right at the start of beginning a meditative practice because tons of thoughts and emotions come out, tons of them, like a waterfall, so much. You think, why would I want to do this? It causes all these tons of thoughts and emotions to come up, and I don't like it. No, it's actually just showing you what's always in the backdrop of your mind and why it feels so overwhelming and stressful to be. And so, but then that response, if you just keep doing it, even sometimes for people, a few days, it could take sometimes a few weeks, but that starts to more like a slow moving river. Instead of that constant backdrop where you have the slow moving river, you can handle that. And so then anything outside in life that's coming at you, people's opinions and attacking and all the stuff that's going on that you don't agree with, and it's not such a big deal. And so then you don't feel like you need to turn to other hammock responses, because you have it within your own self to not get fixated and grasp and cling on to those things.
Okay. So you said, as anything, it's something that you really need to have a practice. You need to be consistent with it. You said sometimes it can take a week, sometimes it can take weeks, months, years to get this practice a part of your life. But what do you recommend in terms of time for a meditation practice? Like, do you recommend someone start with like 5 minutes, 20 minutes? Like, is there a specific time frame per day that you would suggest to somebody?
Yeah, I think most people in today's time, because everybody is so distracted, and that's a sign of stress, distraction into everything, would just be 1 or 2 minutes. Use that box breathing. You can look up the GIF box breathing on the internet. There's tons of them. And it's basically inhale, exhale, and in between each one is a pause. And you're moving with the moving figure on the screen. That, even just like I said, 2 minutes, even 1 minute, and then do it multiple times a day. Because 1 minute, anybody can do that. Even at work, you can do that, because you normally take not breaks. You're all like distracted and everything else on your phone or whatever. Instead, 1 minute every hour. Try that, because that's actually simple. And then you start to see that you can actually do it. And then you might not feel a lot of different things, or you might. Everybody's got different aptitudes. But say you have one experience in that 1 minute that shows you, whoa, that's something that I haven't really experienced before. Then you get the the energy and the desire, the enthusiastic joyfulness that you want to try it again, and then you'll extend it. So I'd say really short sessions and frequent, instead of trying these long sessions, because then you can end. And if you end a meditation in not a good way, because your mind started going again and you're just judging yourself, that's another thing, let go of judgment. Nothing's good or bad, and you're just letting go. But then you might not want to do it again. So short sessions, a lot of them, and then just work up from there. And then it can become much more powerful. The Tibetans talk about, Indian, Tibetan, China, and Korea, Japan, is those small sessions. And then they work up to larger ones. And then with that, you're literally rewiring your nervous system. And that's what a lot of us are feeling right now. You talk about stress hormones, yeah, but the nervous system is enacted before the stress hormones start. So we're feeling the nervous system's response kind of thing to things. Even if we're good at hiding it, we're still feeling it. The angst that comes with that nervous system when it's firing. And so what you'll notice is that you don't fire off as much. You just don't. And other people tend to notice it before you because the interactions, the relations between us become less strained. So they don't feel tense when they're around you, and you don't feel tense around them. And you'll feel like, oh, they've become nicer. I joke about this. It's the relationship together is easing off. And that's the idea I think that we all need to do is we just need to ease off, because a lot of people are putting out their opinions that don't really have any critical thinking skills. It's coming from emotion and reactivity, which is a stress or fear response. So a lot of people are trying to control everybody else right now because they're in states of fear. And there's people adding fuel to the fire that are in those controlling ways. You can get out of that too and just ease off, and you'll feel it. You'll feel it with all your relationships in your family, in your workplace, in general. And even not reacting to things you see in movies or the news or whatever that you normally would, you just will start easing off. And when you ease off, your mind is much more clear. So you get an idea of the picture, and you don't need to engage in opinions. You just kind of see an overall picture, and all you really wish for other people is for them to open their mind too, just ease off, ease off. And then I think that's when we start to connect again, because we've really become in a state of disconnection and protection. And that's just an ongoing stress response. We're in the freeze response, ongoing. And then we're faking everything. We're fawning. That's the other F in the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Then we're faking everything because we're worried about what other people might think or say or judge or whatever. And so we're not being authentic. And that takes a lot of energy. And that's wiping out our body and our mind. And we can't sleep. And we're always worried in a state of angst. Some of us are better at coping it with than others. But the meditation, when you get that, you stop feeling that and stop being so drawn into those responses. And then you get into the other state, which is the rest, digest, heal mode. And then you start to feel different in your mind and your body. And that's that youthful response. You feel like a kid again. Even if you're 60 or 70 or 80, you start to feel like a kid again, instead of drawn into this adult, a big sandbox. People throwing sand at each other.
So relatable, and it's everything that you said, people's opinions and comments and people sharing it and then people negatively talking about it. It's so exhausting. But in terms of meditation in particular, I love that you really stressed about doing shorter bouts more frequently, because when people think of doing a meditation practice, like sitting down for 20 minutes, it's just not realistic for some people. Well, I think it's realistic for everybody if it's something that you just realize your body needs. But for me, I know whenever I'm about to do something like go into a building, like whether it is to work or like the grocery store, or whether I'm about to go into a meeting, I really just take 1 minute of that little meditation practice, close my eyes, just to gather my thoughts before making any decisions, even as simple as buying food. Like it's just being more clear and intentional without all of the external things playing into that, right? So I know you mentioned meditation being also a state of, that rest and digest, feeling more clear. I want to jump to sleep. Let's talk a little bit more about sleep. I mean, we know this is like a foundation in all health, especially cognitive health. But I would love to know, to what degree does it have an impact on your cognitive health? And honestly, how many hours is important to support the optimal level of cognitive function?
Yeah, so right off the bat there, if you're in chronic states of stress or taking certain drugs that inhibit sleep cycles, then you're not falling into the deep states of sleep. So you got stage 1, 2, 3, and 4 as you're going into deeper and deeper states of changing of the rhythms. And then you have the rapid eye movement or REM sleep, right? You go through different cycles in a night. I think it's an hour and a half on each cycle. So in the REM state is when your mind is really processing all of the new information it took in on that day, of to do with everything, basically the flavor of your whole mind during that day. And then it's basically relating it to what you already have, and then processing it and trying to build things together so that you function in a more cohesive and harmonious way the next day. So you're basically, reality, each life, we're supposed to be taking in new information and then relating it, like I said, to other things that we already have, and then becoming a more holistic being, so that you feel more connected in life and you're more capable. But what seems to be happening with stress, and this has been ongoing for a long time, it's probably its worst stage ever in the last 2-3 years because of what's been going on, is that you're losing the last stage. So no matter if you sleep 8-9 hours or whatever, you wake up, you don't feel refreshed. You still need to have stimulants to get yourself going, or you don't feel good. You don't feel joyful the next day or enthusiastic at all. And that has to do with that the quantity of sleep obviously is not equal to quality. So for me, I hardly sleep at all. And it's been like that since I was a little kid. And I just think you need to get the quality aspects of sleep. And when people tell you you need so many hours of sleep and then you get stressed out that you're not getting it, it's really funny that if you actually feel good and you're only getting 5 hours of sleep versus someone that sleeps 10 hours, and when you meet them, they're grumpy or whatever. So it basically that's very subjective how much sleep you need. Most people think they need quantity because they're not getting good quality sleep. And so that's another thing. If meditation becomes part of your life and practice, right, that you're actually going out into life and you're in a meditative state in a way, not in a way, life becomes meditation instead of formally practice, you don't need much sleep. And your sleep is whatever you get, and you still can function more effectively than most people. And they wonder how that's possible. And that's simply because you're getting quality. It's better to get 2 quality full cycles of stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it goes back a little bit, say 3, 4 REM, right? And you only sleep 4 hours than it is to sleep 10 hours, not ever getting into stage 4 and REM. And that's the thing when people take sleeping meds too, you don't tend to experience stage 4 and REM. And so you can't process properly. That's why people feel so dopey that next day, and it doesn't help. You're not actually getting your mind and body back into the healing regenerative state, but you feel that you got your sleep, but you don't feel like it did anything for you. So I think mine is quality over quantity is huge. Meditation is huge on that. And any other things that you take that can help you feel at ease, but don't get you addicted to some type of thing that you feel like you need. So lifestyle factors are big in what you eat or you exercise or meditation, things like that.
So is the only way to know whether or not the quality of your sleep, is that just based on how you're waking up and feeling, whether you're still feeling groggy and tired or feeling energized? Or is there another way somebody would be able to relate to know whether they had that full sleep cycle?
Little quizzes for yourself that they're obviously not the same. It could be just the same quiz each day that you don't know all the words on a list. And so you take it and say, how do I remember this day? And then try the next day and see what's happening. Is your memory getting better? So say you have a whole bunch of information that you've learned, and that would be like you had a desk, folders in your drawer, and everything's organized neatly. That's your mind, say all your thoughts and emotions and things like that. Then you take in new information. It would be like taking some of your file folders out that are similar to things that you learned today, which are new pieces of paper all over your desk, and you're looking at them. And then in your sleep, when you look at them, you start to figure out how to file this new information and process it. That would be like when you're in REM sleep. That's what your mind's doing. It's looking at everything on your desk and it's figuring out, how can I kind of organize this? And maybe I make copies and it goes into multiple folders, but I'm getting an idea how it relates. If you don't sleep, it's like leaving everything on the desk. Even your file folders are out of stuff that you already do, and everything's a mess. So even things that you normally had no issue with, you can start, like, for instance, memory, or figuring out how to do certain things that seemed simple before, even like bank codes or whatever that you had memorized. Now I can't remember them. So things like that start to happen because your desk is full of all this new information and some of your old information. So basically getting in that REM state is like cleaning up your whole desk and organizing it and becoming even more efficient next time, because your folders are filled with information that make you more efficient, more effective, more pleasing, more joyful, whatever, I feel like that's how you're going to know. Do you feel like you're getting more disorganized? Your memory is dropping, your moods are dropping, your blood sugar is hard to control. For women, it could be, which is a great signal for women, some men don't get that, is that it could affect your menstrual cycle, right? So I know that's a big thing. even, menstrual cramps or irregularities or mood swings or blood sugar swings, it's easier for women to notice that than it is for men because we don't have a cycle. So
Right.
that's a big one. But anyway, headaches and all the other things can start coming if you're not going into the deeper states of sleep, skin reactions, just because your body's not able to heal the same when you're not getting into those deep states and your mind's not able to heal the same. So you start feeling a degeneration or almost an aging quality in both your mind and your body.
Okay. So really just taking an evaluation of all aspects that could be going on in your body right now, symptom wise, but also your ability to have memories to process the information you've recently learned, or just that, like, even in your week time frame, are you remembering things on your to-do list? You have to write everything down, things like that. So those are all good cues. And those are big things that we talked about in terms of lifestyle, things that people rely on, like caffeine and alcohol, meditation. I think that bottom line is a huge factor in cognitive health and sleep. But aside from those lifestyle factors, I want to give our listeners a little bit more tangible suggestions that they could include in their life every day to support their cognitive health. And I want to talk specifically about medicinal mushrooms because obviously you are the expert at this. So what kind of mushrooms would you recommend for people to take to support their cognitive function?
So I think so there's a number of ways to look at it too, is that circulation to the brain, blood sugar is huge because your brain is depending on glucose. And from an ancient perspective, the brain is like, say, a cell phone. The brain is like a cell phone receiving the signal of consciousness. So however your cell phone's working, you can receive and adapt to consciousness better. In modern times, we try to believe that the brain is your mind, but that doesn't really make much sense from a perspective of consciousness. Anyway, you need circulation, blood sugar control, and then adaptogens. That's what you're talking about, the mushrooms, which is huge. In the ancient times, they knew this. That's why it went to the top of Tibetan and Chinese medicine, shamanic medicines, the mushrooms, is they take you into a different state of mind where you're not in that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. You're basically mind at ease, free and clear. And I think the key mushrooms that people are trying to take for their mind would then have to help control blood sugar, which mushrooms do. Feed the microbiome, because the microbiome, the things that live in your intestinal tracts especially, they affect your mind. There's even interesting research on showing that a lot of the ways you think have to do with different compounds that they're producing, which they want you to eat or do different things to be more conducive to their health and survival. So your mind, what is that? Interesting, could be affected by your microbiome even. So healthy eating is huge, which mushrooms also support the health of the microbiome. They feed it. The biggest mushroom by far for the mind is lion's mane. And lion's mane, I think it might be the biggest mushroom. It might be the biggest natural product in our whole industry, not just mushrooms right now. They talk about it all over mainstream. It increases nerve growth factor output in the central nervous system, brain and spinal column. So it can help heal different parts of your mind, increase the manufacture and maintenance of brain tissue. So then enhancing your cell phone's receptivity, say, to mine, so it functions better. And it does the same in the body. It increases nerve growth factor in your peripheral nervous system and your enteric nervous system, your gut brain, to enhance nervous system development, vascular development throughout the entire body. So you're getting a mind-body mushroom. If you need even more, if energy is a big thing for you, and stress has been a big thing for you, and you just have no energy, like adrenal exhaustion, totally wiped out, hard getting up in the morning, I don't even care about being irritated or worried, that kind of idea, that's cordyceps. So that combination is huge, cordyceps and lion's mane. And then if sleep is a massive issue, those two can really help with sleep. Lion's mane does too. Sometimes it's, things like reishi or chaga, those to add those, because they're very much more about anti-stress, relaxation, clear mind, sleep, better sleep. That would be, reishi, like a chill pill, and chaga on the long term. So there's lots of different things. Lion's mane is the top for mind, but it depends. If it's associated a lot with your body too, then I would pull in the cordyceps and maybe reishi. So combining the mushrooms has a stronger effect than one alone, even at much lower doses of each one, because they have synergistic combining effects.
Okay. So obviously there is the Purica Complete 360. Now, does that have lion's mane in it as well?
Yes. So the Complete 360, what we do is we micronize or make the particles super tiny so that it breaks out all the fiber and all the active ingredients are released. And there's huge active amounts so that you need enough of each ingredient to actually have effects on your nervous system and endocrine system. And so what we were trying to do with Complete 360 is bring back basically the strongest compounds for adaptogens to deal with stress and get you back into that mind at ease, free and clear, that blue sky mind kind of idea in mind and body, is put them together in a product that you could get the best of Ayurvedic medicine, Tibetan medicine, Chinese medicine, shamanic medicine, and then they're synergistic. Then we tested it for a year and a half before we applied for the NPN on clinicians, people at the store level, family and friends, a lot of it. And the results were profound. It's my favorite product because it affects you can definitely notice how it affects your mind. And if you have something that's an assisting agent like this, it'll help you to get into states, if you want to read more again, if you want to try meditation, if you want to try Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, things like that. Or if you want to get out in nature more, you've just been sitting at home watching TV, but you want to get that enthusiasm back. Well, if you get in the state, which this is what Complete 360 was designed to do, is get in that state that you feel that you want to engage in that childlike mind again, that what they call it, the mind of wonder, where things are, you feel more gratitude again, appreciate life. And from that, they found in research, because gratitude is the #1 trait of what they consider happy people when they did studies. You can't make yourself, I can't say I should appreciate or you should appreciate. That just makes people mad and get stressed. So you have to feel that. But in order to feel that, you have to get engaged in different practices that are not typical of your life, which could be fall into the stress thing. So that would be like meditation. But in order to get into meditation, the mindset has to you have to tweak the mindset or try to prompt it, almost like training wheels, give it things that'll help it get in that state. And there's nothing better out there than the medicinal mushrooms because they change your mindset without get into an escape response, like I talked about before, where we get into alcohol and drugs and watching binge things on Netflix or whatever we do, right? It's changing your mind. So the Complete 360 is the combo of all these things to help to rewire your mind for connection and engaging. And from that state you feel more gratitude. And when you feel more gratitude, you love to learn. And the idea, that's the second trait that came out of this. These are dominant traits in happy, successful people over everything else. Compassion, wisdom, everything else was gratitude and flowing from that love of learning. Love of learning for me is not just book learning and things like that, or learning from lectures. It's you love to witness life, that you basically you're much more willing to listen to others and be interested in what they have to say and learn from them rather than waiting for them to shut up so that you can say what you think. So the idea is, it's not that you have to make yourself that way. It just starts to come from feeling gratitude. And anyways, that's what I was trying to do in formulating Complete 360, was to help someone get even glimpses of gratitude. Because glimpses of gratitude, I think that's huge. It literally, glimpses of gratitude are probably the most meaningful thing in changing your physical health and your psychological health, and being able to be a productive person in this world again. Because everybody has something meaningful to offer, but not when we're stressed. We don't. And stress is basically ubiquitous. So if anybody could get glimpses of gratitude, even for just a few seconds, you will never forget it. It gives you that motivation to want to go further. So anyway, sorry I sidetracked, but I think Complete 360 is something that could give you even a little glimpse, which then will really want to make you go further and further and further. And it just gets better and better. It's always, even if somebody's a seasoned meditator or yoga or whatever, to take Complete 360 would make a big difference. They'll feel their practice engaging in a stronger way. And I know that even for myself, it definitely does this. So I'm speaking, everybody has to speak subjectively, obviously, because like I say, science is probabilistic now. So you're basically seeing, how does it affect me? Do I actually feel something? And that is crucial to Purica as a company. And to me, is it has to be something that gives results. Otherwise, it's just, oh, taking this, yeah, it's supposed to be good for me. No, that's not good enough. It needs to get results in people. And I think that's why people really appreciate the Complete 360 and these medicinal mushrooms and ashwagandha, because they feel it. They can feel it when they're processed properly, and the active ingredient is large enough to actually impact the body and the mind.
Yes. So for our listeners who are kind of struggling in all of those areas, like need support sleep wise, they need some support to reduce their stress, but then also to get to that point of having a little bit of mental clarity, finding that gratitude, getting to the, deeper state of sleep as well. The Complete 360 for sure. Now, in terms of taking lion's mane by itself, could you, like, my initial thought would be somebody who is already taking Complete 360. They're kind of balanced in all areas they're sleeping better, they're naturally reducing their stress, they're living better, healthier lifestyles, but maybe they're in a time where they're learning something new, or they're changing jobs, or they're back to school. That's something that takes a little bit more, we'll say, brain power. Is that when somebody would be using lion's mane? And is there another time, like, for preventative measures as well? Or what's your suggestion for that?
Absolutely what you said. Whenever you want to learn something new, you're in an environment of scholastic environment, or even if you're learning new, if you're, say, in martial arts or in the military or some type of athletic event where you need to learn all these different physical skills, that's another thing that lion's mane is essential for, is cognitive mind-body coordination. So mind-body coordination, any kind of new learning, whether it's physical or psychological, is huge. Also, if kids are suffering from, or kids or adults are suffering from a distracted mind all over the place, which, people term things like ADHD or ADD. Lion's mane and reishi are huge. And I think too, when you are talking about school, I think what a lot of students might not realize is blood sugar control is huge. So you have to control your blood sugar because the brain depends on it. But circulation is huge. What is going to increase circulation is some exercise. So I think people need to, oh, I got to study. I don't have time for exercise. I don't have time. If you don't move, you're not getting blood flow to the brain. It's making it much more difficult to retain information. So even if it's a little bit of motion, so motion and lion's mane together, right? And blood sugar control. But these are huge factors in improving your memory. And you'll see it even if you're a seasoned student. If you integrate lion's mane at a certain dose, you can take powder, put it in your food, you don't even notice it. And that's a less expensive way to do it. Or the capsules. You take enough of it, then you will notice it. Like I said, even if you're seasoned advanced students or whatever. The other thing, if you take larger doses, like say beyond 6 caps a day, say a couple teaspoons a day, people report a common side effect or side benefit, whatever I think, is people dream in color, very vivid dreaming. So if dreaming is something interesting for you and you work through things in your dreams and you think about the next day, in order to increase the clarity and the color content of your dreams, that you can just increase those lines. It's very safe. People eat it all the time. It's actually my favorite mushroom of all to eat. It takes on really interesting textures and flavors. You just have to find it. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful mushroom. If you see it in nature, if you look at it, it looks like white or colored tendrils, like a lion's mane, literally, and it's really large. So if you ever find a stash of that growing in nature, don't tell anybody else.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, perfect. So kind of, start with the complete 360, especially if you're still managing, high levels of stress, just trying to adapt to changing your lifestyle. But if you're learning something new and you want that mind body coordination connection, distracted mind, I think that's huge too, ADHD, undiagnosis of just attention, issues in all ages, then the lion's mane would be a great addition, which is amazing. Perfect.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing again all of your information and just every feedback piece that you have personally and professionally. It's much appreciated. And for our listeners, in our show notes on the Joanne's Place website, I will leave the products that Jason recommended today, and then you can click through and learn a little bit more about those, or you can pop into one of the Joanne's Place locations and talk to one of our supplement specialists about these products as well. And they will also be in display in the store. So thanks again so much, Jason, for joining us and sharing everything on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, Marissa.
If you're still here, thank you so much for tuning in today's episode. If you want to learn more about the topics that we covered in today's episode, as well as the products, you've got two options. You can head over to our Joanne's Place website to review the show notes. We'll leave that in the description below. Or you can pop into one of our Joanne's Place locations and talk to one of our amazing staff. Just a reminder, if you haven't already, go over to your preferred platform, follow our page, and then find us over on social media so you're notified as soon as a new episode is released. That's all for now, and we'll see you in the next episode.